A woman could stand closer to power than almost anyone in the Tudor court. Yet she could disappear without leaving a single secure place behind. She could whisper into the ear of a king, influence decisions inside candlelit chambers, and move through halls filled with curiosity and quiet attention. But the same court that once watched her rise could turn silent when reputation, politics, and marriage demanded order. Favor without a crown was influence without protection, and admiration could fade faster than anyone expected. Tonight, we step quietly into the shadowed corridors of the Tudor court to uncover how mistresses could shape power yet remain the most vulnerable figures within it. So, before you feel comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Only if your heart truly wants to. If you do like it, leave a little comment letting me know what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights. Adjust the pillow to fit your head. Maybe turn on a fan to create a relaxing atmosphere. And let's begin this journey together tonight. If someone stood quietly at the edge of a Tudor marketplace or in the courtyard of a noble household, the pattern of authority would not take long to notice. Men moved through these spaces with the calm certainty of people whose position was never questioned. They owned the land, commanded the households, and carried the titles that defined the structure of society. Their names appeared on property documents, legal records, and family histories. Around them, everything else seemed to arrange itself accordingly. The Tudor world was built on a hierarchy that was both visible and deeply accepted. At the top stood the king, whose authority was not only political but symbolic. His power represented the order of the entire realm. Beneath him were layers of noblemen, landowners, and officials who exercised control over estates, cities, and households. Their influence extended through law, wealth, and reputation. Property lay at the center of this system. Land determined status, income, and authority. Estates passed through male inheritance lines, linking generations of fathers and sons. A family's position depended heavily on maintaining this chain without interruption. Because of this, every marriage, every alliance, and every child carried political meaning. Women lived within this structure, but they rarely directed it. Their lives were shaped by the decisions made around them rather than by choices of their own. From childhood onward, their futures were tied to marriage. A daughter represented the possibility of alliance. A marriage could strengthen relationships between powerful families, secure land, or stabilize political arrangements. For this reason, marriage in Tudor England was rarely understood as a purely emotional bond. It was an agreement with consequences that reached far beyond the couple involved. Families negotiated these unions carefully, weighing advantages and risks in ways that resembled diplomatic strategy. Inside noble households, this arrangement influenced daily life in subtle ways. Conversations about marriage were common, often taking place long before the individuals involved had much say in the matter. A suitable husband meant protection, legitimacy, and stability. Without marriage, a woman possessed little formal standing in society. This dependence created a particular form of vulnerability. A woman's security depended largely on the man she married. His reputation shaped hers. His property sustained her life. His family connections determined her social network. Marriage placed her within a framework that offered recognition and protection, even if personal happiness was not always guaranteed. For men, affection could exist alongside these arrangements, but it rarely replaced them. Love might grow between husband and wife, but the marriage itself had already been established for practical reasons. Political advantage and family continuity carried more weight than personal feeling. This does not mean that emotion was absent from Tudor life. People experienced affection, jealousy, and attachment just as strongly as in any other era. However, Those emotions operated inside a system where strategy and reputation mattered greatly. A relationship that ignored these realities could quickly become dangerous. The connection between love and politics appeared in countless small details. Gifts between noble families hinted at future alliances. Invitations to gatherings signaled approval or rejection. Even seemingly private relationships could influence how households and estates interacted with one another. If we imagine this world from a modern perspective, it might resemble a society where personal relationships determine access to opportunities, security, and recognition. The difference was that in Tudor England, these connections were not informal advantages. They formed the backbone of the entire social order. Because marriage functioned as the gateway into that order, the absence of marriage created uncertainty. A woman without that recognition might still appear in elite circles, but her place remained ambiguous. She could be welcomed one day and excluded the next without explanation. This ambiguity would become especially significant when relationships formed outside the boundaries of marriage. When affection developed between powerful men and women who were not their wives, the situation produced a complicated tension. On the one hand, personal closeness could grant access to influence. On the other hand, the lack of official recognition left that influence exposed. Many people within Tudor society understood this contradiction perfectly well. Courtiers, servants, and family members all observed the delicate balance between private affection and public legitimacy. They knew that the stability of the household depended on preserving appearances, even when reality was far more complicated. In this environment, love rarely existed as a simple matter between two individuals. It intersected constantly with ambition, reputation, and political calculation. Relationships were watched carefully because their consequences could ripple outward into the larger structure of power. For women especially, the stakes were high. Marriage offered a place within society's official framework. Outside that framework, life became far less predictable. Favor, reputation, and personal protection could shift quickly, leaving a woman vulnerable to forces she could not control. This reality formed the background of countless stories that unfolded within Tudor courts and households. It shaped how people behaved, whom they trusted, and how they interpreted affection and loyalty. The world might have appeared orderly on the surface, but beneath that order lay a network of relationships constantly influenced by ambition and strategy. In Tudor England, power flowed through men who controlled land, law, and reputation, while women relied on marriage to secure their place within that system. Yet not every relationship fits neatly inside the boundaries that society prefers to recognize. And within that narrow space between affection and legitimacy, certain lives would begin to unfold in ways that made influence possible, but safety uncertain. Marriage in Tudor society carried a significance that extended far beyond private affection. It created a recognized bond that placed a woman inside the official structure of law, a religion, an inheritance. Once that bond was established, it changed the way the world treated her. She was no longer simply a woman connected to a powerful man. She became the lawful partner whose position was acknowledged by institutions that governed everyday life. The church played a central role in confirming this status. A marriage blessed by religious authority was considered legitimate not only in the eyes of the couple, but in the eyes of the entire community. Priests recorded the union. Ceremonies marked the beginning of the household, and the moral language surrounding marriage reinforced its importance. The union was not meant to be temporary or uncertain. It was treated as a foundation for stability. The law reinforced what religion had established. A lawful wife gained recognition that extended into property agreements, inheritance rights, and family records. Her marriage linked two families together, and that connection carried consequences for land, wealth, and future generations. Documents, contracts, and genealogies recorded her name as part of the official lineage. Inside, a noble household. These records translated into daily authority. The wife occupied the visible center of domestic order. Her place at formal gatherings was defined, and her presence confirmed the legitimacy of the household. Guests recognized her status immediately. Servants understood where loyalty and respect were expected to flow. This recognition protected more than reputation. It protected property and children as well. When a woman married lawfully, the children born within that union carried unquestioned legitimacy. They inherited their father's name and his claims to land or titles. This continuity was essential for noble families that depended on stable lines of succession. The wife, therefore, represented the stability of inheritance itself. Her presence ensured that the chain of property and authority would pass through recognized heirs. Without that certainty, disputes could arise that threatened the entire structure of a family estate. Because of this, marriage acted almost like a symbolic crown, resting quietly on the wife's head. It did not give her political power in the same sense as a king or nobleman. Instead, it granted legitimacy. That legitimacy commanded respect in a way that personal affection alone never could. Even when marriages were strained or distant, the recognition remained powerful. A husband might spend little time with his wife, yet society still treated her as the rightful partner. Her title and position continued to carry weight in public settings and legal matters. The structure surrounding marriage protected her place, even when private emotions shifted. Families invested enormous effort into maintaining this stability. Parents arranged unions carefully, considering the advantages that each alliance might bring. A well-chosen marriage could strengthen ties between noble houses, secure estates, and ensure that property remained within trusted networks. This strategic approach to marriage did not necessarily eliminate emotion, but it ensured that affection existed alongside practical considerations. Stability and legitimacy mattered more than romantic feelings alone. A household built on lawful marriage offered a sense of order that society depended upon. In many ways, the symbolic value of marriage could be more important than personal happiness. The lawful wife represented continuity, reputation, and the visible legitimacy of the family. Her role reassured the community that the household remained anchored within accepted norms. The contrast between this position and any unofficial relationship was striking. A woman outside marriage might share private closeness with a powerful man, yet she possessed none of the protections that surrounded a wife. Her influence might exist, but it rested entirely on personal favor. The wife, by contrast, stood within the framework of recognition created by both church and law. Her authority came not from emotional intimacy, but from the structure that acknowledged her place. In Tudor society, legitimacy mattered deeply. Titles, property, and reputation all depended on it. Marriage functioned as the visible sign that a relationship belonged within that order. Without it, even the closest connection could remain uncertain. Lawful marriage placed a woman within the structure that protected property, reputation, and the legitimacy of future heirs. Yet outside that structure, other relationships could still develop close to the same centers of power. And it was in that space between recognition and intimacy that another kind of influence quietly began to grow. The presence of a Tudor mistress rarely appeared in the official records that documented family life. Household accounts might mention gifts, letters might hint at affection, and rumours might travel through the corridors of court. Yet the formal structure of history often remained silent. Within genealogies that carefully listed fathers, mothers, marriages, and legitimate heirs, the mistress usually did not exist. This absence was not accidental. Tudor society depended heavily on the clarity of lineage. Noble families kept detailed records that traced generations through lawful unions. These records determined inheritance, property rights, and social standing. Every name included within them confirmed legitimacy. Every name excluded remained outside the recognized structure of family authority. The mistress stood precisely in that excluded space. Without marriage, her relationship carried no legal recognition. There was no contract to define her place, no ceremony to confirm her position, and no record that formally connected her to the household. Even when a powerful man openly favoured her, the relationship remained unofficial. Inside a great house, this created a peculiar situation. The mistress might spend long hours near the centre of domestic life. She could walk through the same corridors as the wife, dine in rooms close to the household elite, and interact with servants and courtiers who clearly understood her connection to the master of the house. Yet none of these interactions granted permanence. A lawful wife possessed a place that could be defended by law, family alliances, and social expectations. The mistress possessed none of those protections. Her position depended entirely on the continued interest of the man who favoured her. If that interest faded, the foundation beneath her life could disappear quickly. This dependency shaped the way mistresses lived. Their security rested on maintaining affection and avoiding conflict that might threaten the delicate balance surrounding them. A careless rumour, a shift in attention, or the arrival of a younger rival could alter everything. The absence of formal recognition also meant that their names rarely entered the historical record. Chroniclers who carefully documented marriages and births often ignored relationships that existed outside lawful unions. As a result, many mistresses passed through the lives of powerful men without leaving clear traces in official histories. Occasionally, a letter or account book preserved a small glimpse of their existence. A gift of jewelry might appear in household expenses. A private correspondence might reveal moments of intimacy or tension. These fragments offer historians rare windows into lives that society preferred not to record openly, yet even these traces remained indirect. The mistress's identity often circulated through whispers rather than documents. Courtiers spoke quietly about her influence. Servants noticed which rooms she visited and which gifts appeared in her possession. Visitors might observe how frequently she appeared near the man whose attention defined her status. In this way, knowledge about mistresses travelled through observation rather than law. If one compares this situation to modern life, it might resemble someone working inside an institution without an official title or contract. They might participate in important conversations and even influence decisions. Yet their role would remain undefined. Their presence could vanish without explanation, because nothing formally guaranteed their position. For Tudor mistresses, the consequences were even more personal. Their homes, their comfort, and sometimes even their safety depended on remaining in favour. Without that favour, the resources supporting their lives could be withdrawn. This dependency created a strange mixture of visibility and invisibility. Within the private environment of a household or court, the mistress could be widely known. People understood her connection and quietly adjusted their behaviour around it. At the same time, the official structures of society continued to treat her as though she were not part of the family. The contrast between private reality and public silence defined the position of many Tudor mistresses. They could share moments of intimacy with powerful men, yet they remained absent from the legal and historical structures that defined legitimacy. Their lives unfolded in a narrow space between influence and uncertainty. Some mistresses attempted to secure their future through gifts, property quietly transferred into their possession, or support from sympathetic allies. Others relied entirely on continued affection. None of these strategies offered the same stability that lawful marriage provided. The structure of Tudor society left little room for recognition outside official unions. Because of this, the mistress's life remained suspended between proximity to power and exclusion from its protections. Her influence might be real. Her position was never secure. A Tudor mistress could stand close to wealth, comfort, and even political influence. Yet her name remained absent from the records that defined legitimacy. Her place existed only through the continued favour of a powerful man. In a court where favour could change without warning, that fragile dependence carried dangers few people openly discussed. A mistress in Tudor society could stand closer to power than many people who officially held titles. She might spend evenings in private chambers, where conversations moved quietly between personal affection and matters of consequence. The man beside her could command armies, appoint officials, or determine the fate of entire families. In those moments, the distance between intimacy and authority could become very small. This closeness created a form of influence that was difficult to measure, yet impossible to ignore. A few carefully chosen words spoken in private could shape the mood of a powerful man. A suggestion offered gently might linger in his thoughts long after the conversation ended. Even silence, when timed carefully, could change the way he interpreted events unfolding around him. Within the quiet spaces of Tudor households and courts, these subtle exchanges mattered. Decisions rarely appeared suddenly. They developed slowly through discussions, doubts, and private reflections. A mistress who shared those moments of reflection could become part of the process that shaped them. Courtiers often understood this better than anyone. They observed the movements of favour with careful attention. When a certain woman appeared frequently near the chambers of a powerful man, when gifts arrived at her rooms, or when her presence was tolerated at gatherings usually reserved for the inner circle, people noticed. Influence did not require official authority. It required proximity. For a time, this proximity could feel almost like power. A mistress might watch how others adjusted their behavior around her. Servants might show extra politeness. Visitors might speak cautiously in her presence. And rumors might circulate suggesting that her opinions mattered. In such moments, the line between influence and authority could appear blurred. Yet this appearance concealed a fundamental weakness. The power surrounding a mistress existed only as long as the relationship itself continued. It was not written into law, confirmed by ceremony, or supported by family alliances. The influence came from affection, and affection could change. This uncertainty shaped every aspect of a mistress's life. She had to remain attentive to the moods of the man whose favour sustained her position. A careless remark, an awkward moment in public, or the presence of a rival could alter the delicate balance that allowed her to remain near the centre of power. In Tudor courts, reputation moved quickly. A rumour whispered in one corridor could reach another within hours. Courtiers listened carefully for signs that favour was shifting. Once doubt appeared, distance often followed. The mistress had little protection against this change. Unlike a wife, she could not rely on the authority of marriage to secure her place. There were no documents guaranteeing her position, no family alliances obligated to defend her, and no legal structure capable of preserving her influence. Everything depended on continued affection and the perception that the relationship remained acceptable. This fragility meant that even small mistakes carried serious consequences. A disagreement that would have passed unnoticed within a lawful marriage might appear dangerous when it involved a mistress. A display of jealousy, a public argument, or even the suggestion of manipulation could transform admiration into suspicion. Courts were environments where appearance mattered deeply. Stability and legitimacy were valued above all else. When a private relationship threatened to disrupt that image, pressure often grew to distance the woman involved. Some mistresses recognized this danger and behaved with extreme caution. They avoided public displays of influence and allowed their presence to remain discreet. Others, carried by the excitement of proximity to power, misjudged the limits of their position. The difference between those two approaches could determine how long the favour lasted. In a world where titles and marriages defined legitimacy, a mistress existed in a space that felt both powerful and exposed at the same time. She might hear conversations that revealed political plans or family disputes, yet she possessed no authority to defend herself if those same conversations later turned against her. The contradiction defined her existence. From the outside, observers might see the elegance of her clothing, the comfort of her rooms, or the attention she received from influential men. These details suggested privilege, They created the impression that she had secured a remarkable position within the court. What those observers rarely saw was the uncertainty beneath that appearance. Every favour could be withdrawn. Every privilege could disappear. The proximity to power that created opportunity also created risk. When affection changed, the same closeness that once elevated a mistress could suddenly make her vulnerable. A Tudor mistress could stand beside one of the most powerful men in the kingdom and speak to him in a voice few others ever heard. Yet nothing in law or tradition existed to protect the influence created by that intimacy. A single mistake, a shifting mood, or a quiet decision behind closed doors could erase the fragile world she depended on. Within the private rooms of a Tudor household, the atmosphere often differed greatly from the formal spaces of halls and courts. Public ceremonies followed strict rules, and conversations before witnesses were measured and cautious. Private chambers, however, allowed a different kind of interaction. Here, the language of authority softened, and personal emotion moved more freely between individuals. For a mistress, these moments of privacy created a rare opportunity. She occupied a place where formal titles and rigid expectations carried less weight. The man beside her might be a nobleman, a powerful court official, or even the ruler of the kingdom. Yet within those rooms, he was also a person capable of doubt, frustration, and reflection. Because of this, conversations inside these spaces often touched subjects that would never appear openly in court. A man might speak more honestly about rivals, about decisions that troubled him, or about the pressures of maintaining authority. These moments of openness could reveal far more than official discussions ever did. The mistress did not command armies or sign decrees. Her influence worked differently. It appeared through tone, patience, and the ability to listen without challenging the authority of the man she accompanied. By allowing him to speak freely, she could quietly guide the direction of his thoughts. A suggestion offered in such a moment did not resemble an order. It might appear as a simple remark, perhaps a small observation about another courtier or a reflection about a recent event. Yet, in the quiet environment of private conversation, even a small remark could remain in a man's mind. Over time, these remarks could shape how he interpreted the world around him. Courtiers understood this dynamic well. Many political decisions were not formed in a single dramatic moment. Instead, they developed gradually through discussions, reflections, and emotional impressions. A mistress who spent long evenings near the center of a powerful man's personal life could become part of that gradual process. This influence often extended to matters of favor. Tudor courts relied heavily on personal relationships when distributing opportunity. Positions within the household, invitations to gatherings, and small privileges could change according to the mood of the person who held authority. A mistress, by sharing private time with that authority, could sometimes shift those moods. If she spoke positively about a particular courtier, the impression might linger. If she expressed unease about another, that unease might slowly grow in the mind of the man who listened to her. These subtle shifts rarely appeared dramatic. They unfolded gradually, often without clear acknowledgement. In many cases, the mistress herself might not even intend to exercise influence in an obvious way. Her presence alone could alter the emotional atmosphere surrounding a powerful man. A person who felt understood or admired might view the world differently from someone who felt isolated. This emotional environment mattered in Tudor politics more than official records often reveal. Decisions about appointments, alliances, and personal favour frequently depended on impressions formed during informal moments rather than on public debate. Within the quiet privacy of a chamber, a mistress could contribute to those impressions simply through conversation. Yet this influence remained delicate. It depended entirely on the trust and affection that allowed those private conversations to exist. If that trust weakened, the space in which influence operated could disappear just as quickly as it had appeared. For this reason, the power associated with intimacy was both remarkable and uncertain. A mistress might hear thoughts that few advisors ever encountered. She might understand the private concerns of a man whose decisions affected entire households or even the kingdom itself. At the same time, none of this influence carried official recognition. She could encourage a certain perspective, but she could not enforce it. She could shape a conversation, but she could not command obedience. Her role existed entirely within the boundaries of personal connection. This contrast defined the peculiar nature of her position. From the outside, observers might notice changes in favor of certain individuals, or the sudden rise of others within the court. Rumors might circulate suggesting that a particular woman had influenced those developments, yet the mechanism behind such influence remained invisible. No document recorded those conversations. No law acknowledged their importance. The power of intimacy moved quietly through personal relationships, leaving only indirect traces in the subsequent decisions. Private conversation allowed a mistress to influence emotions, impressions, and the quiet reflections that often preceded important decisions. Yet this influence existed only within the fragile space created by personal affection. In a court where loyalty and ambition constantly shifted, even the most intimate voice could eventually be replaced by another. In the Tudor court, political power rarely moved only through official meetings or written decrees. Councils gathered in great chambers, advisors presented arguments, and decisions were eventually announced to the kingdom. Yet long before these formal moments occurred, opinions often developed quietly in smaller rooms where fewer witnesses were present. Private conversation played an important role in this hidden process. Men who held authority carried enormous responsibility. Their choices affected alliances between families, the balance of influence within the court, and sometimes the stability of entire regions. Because of this pressure, they often spoke more freely in private than they ever did before their advisors. Personal spaces allowed reflection, hesitation, and doubt. A mistress who shared these private moments could occasionally become part of that reflection. Her influence did not resemble the authority of ministers or council members. She did not present formal arguments or participate in official debates. Instead, her role appeared in the quiet space between emotion and decision. A conversation that began as a personal exchange might gradually touch subjects connected to politics, alliances, or reputation. Marriage alliances were one of the most sensitive topics discussed within noble circles. Families depended on these arrangements to secure property and strengthen their position within the court. A powerful man considering such an alliance might speak about his concerns in private long before any formal announcement was made. In these moments, a mistress might offer observations that seemed simple or casual. She might speak about the character of a certain family, recall rumors circulating among courtiers, or mention how others perceived a potential alliance. These remarks rarely appeared as direct advice. They moved gently within the conversation, yet small observations sometimes remained in a listener's mind. A man reflecting on political decisions often considers not only strategy, but also the impressions created by those around him. If a particular alliance seemed untrustworthy or inconvenient in private conversation, that feeling might later influence the final decision. Court appointments functioned in a similar way. Tudor courts were crowded with individuals seeking favour, position, or recognition. Advancement often depended on personal recommendation as much as ability. Advisors and ministers certainly played a role, but informal impressions also mattered. A mistress who spent time near the centre of authority could occasionally influence those impressions. By speaking well of one courtier or expressing quiet doubt about another, she might alter how a powerful man viewed the people around him. Over time, those impressions could affect invitations, responsibilities, or opportunities within the court. None of this influence appeared dramatic or easily visible. It unfolded slowly, through repeated conversations and subtle suggestions. Observers might notice the results without ever seeing the process that produced them. Information itself also travelled through unofficial paths. The Tudor court was filled with rumours, whispers, and fragments of knowledge moving between servants, courtiers, and visitors. Much of this information never reached official records, yet it shaped how people understood events around them. A mistress, positioned between private life and public society, sometimes became a quiet channel through which such information passed. She might hear concerns expressed by members of the household, comments shared during gatherings, or impressions gathered from other women in the court. When these details appeared in conversation with the man she accompanied, they could add new perspectives to his understanding of the political environment. This role required careful balance. A mistress could not appear openly involved in political matters. Doing so would threaten the fragile acceptance of her presence within the court. Her influence, therefore, depended on subtlety. Remarks had to appear natural rather than deliberate. The most effective influence often looked like a simple conversation. This quiet participation in political thinking illustrates how Tudor politics extended beyond official institutions. Decisions emerged not only from council chambers, but from a network of personal relationships that shaped how powerful individuals interpreted events. A mistress did not control these decisions directly. She existed on the edge of the process, where emotion and reflection overlapped with political calculation. Yet, even from this position, her presence could sometimes alter the direction of thought. At the same time, the limits of her influence remained clear. She possessed no title, no office, and no recognized authority within the structure of government. Her role existed entirely within the private environment, created by intimacy. Because of this, the same proximity that allowed influence also exposed her to risk. If a conversation crossed the invisible boundary, separating private companionship from political interference, the reaction could be swift and unforgiving. Courtiers guarded their influence carefully. Ministers protected their authority within the council. A woman perceived as interfering in these matters could quickly attract suspicion. The line between personal conversation and political influence was therefore extremely delicate. Those who managed to remain on the safe side of that line could sometimes shape impressions that reached far beyond the private rooms where they were first spoken. Those who crossed it too openly risked losing the fragile tolerance that allowed them to remain near power at all. In this way, the mistress's influence over political matters remained indirect, but occasionally significant. It depended not on command but on suggestion, not on authority but on intimacy. The most powerful part of that influence often remained invisible to everyone except the man who listened. A Tudor mistress could quietly contribute to the reflections that preceded decisions about alliances, court appointments, and reputation. Her voice travelled through private conversation rather than official authority. Yet the same proximity that allowed such influence also created a danger that would become clearer as attention within the court began to shift. In the quiet environment of Tudor courts, influence did not always belong to the loudest voice. Many of the people who survived longest near the centre of power understood that authority could be fragile, and that visible ambition often attracted unwanted attention. For a mistress, especially, survival depended less on open confidence and more on careful restraint. Her position required a particular form of awareness. She had to recognize the limits of her presence within the household and move within those limits without drawing unnecessary attention. Unlike ministers or courtiers, she could not openly debate policy or compete for authority. Her role existed in a space where subtle behavior mattered far more than visible action. Listening became one of her most valuable skills. A powerful man often lived surrounded by expectations. Advisors argued their positions. Courtiers competed for favor, and rivals watched for signs of weakness. In such an environment, genuine listening could be surprisingly rare. Many conversations carried hidden intentions, and every word might be measured for advantage. When a mistress listened quietly, the atmosphere changed. She allowed the man beside her to speak without interruption, without pressure to defend his decisions or justify his emotions. This simple act created a sense of relief that formal relationships often lacked. Through patience rather than confrontation, she could create the impression of understanding. This sense of understanding strengthened the emotional bond that sustained her position. A man who believed that someone truly listened to him might return repeatedly to those private conversations. Over time, the comfort of that attention could deepen trust and familiarity. Yet this trust required careful maintenance. Open disagreement could threaten the delicate balance surrounding a mistress's presence. If she appeared to challenge authority directly, the relationship might begin to resemble competition rather than companionship. Tudor society expected women to display modesty and restraint, especially when standing close to powerful men. For this reason, disagreement often appeared indirectly. A mistress might respond to a troubling decision not by arguing against it, but by asking a gentle question or describing how others might perceive the situation. Instead of confrontation, she offered reflection. These small adjustments allowed her to influence a conversation without appearing to oppose the authority of the man she accompanied. This method reflected a form of strategic behavior rather than passive obedience. It required awareness of timing, tone, and the emotional state of the person listening. Influence moved through suggestion rather than instruction. Another important part of this strategy involved avoiding public conflict with the lawful wife. The wife occupied a position supported by law, religion, and family alliances. Challenging that position openly would invite immediate hostility, not only from the wife herself, but also from her relatives and supporters within the court. Such a confrontation could quickly turn private tension into a public scandal. Mistresses who survived longest near the center of power understood this risk clearly. They avoided situations where comparison with the wife became too visible. Instead of attempting to replace her in public ceremonies or official gatherings, they remained within private spaces, where their presence could be tolerated without threatening the formal order of the household. This restraint protected the fragile balance that allowed them to remain close to influence. Observers within the court often noticed these patterns. Servants, courtiers, and visitors watched carefully as relationships unfolded. A mistress who appeared calm, discreet, and respectful of established boundaries could maintain acceptance for longer periods. By contrast, the visible rivalry often created tension that spread quickly through the household. The appearance of harmony mattered deeply in Tudor society. A household that seemed stable preserved the reputation of the powerful man who led it. Any relationship that threatened that appearance could become a source of discomfort and suspicion. For this reason, many mistresses learned to exercise influence quietly while avoiding the impression of ambition. Their authority existed not through titles or public recognition, but through emotional connection maintained behind closed doors. This quiet form of power required constant awareness. Every gesture, every remark, and every moment of silence could affect how others interpreted her presence. The success of this strategy depended on remaining attentive to the shifting atmosphere of the court. Within that environment, patience often proved more valuable than boldness. The mistress, who listened carefully, spoke gently, and avoided visible rivalry, could maintain her place far longer than someone who attempted to assert influence openly. Her role relied on creating comfort rather than competition. Through this careful balance, influence remained possible without provoking immediate resistance. A Tudor mistress often remained near power through patience, discretion, and the quiet ability to listen rather than confront. Her influence depended on trust, while carefully avoiding open conflict with the structures that protected the lawful wife. Over time, however, the silent adjustments within those private conversations could begin to alter the atmosphere of an entire court. The Tudor court was a place where words carried weight, but silence often carried even more. Public debates and official discussions filled the great halls. Yet the true movement of influence frequently occurred in quieter moments, where very little was said openly. In such an environment, silence could become a tool as effective as an argument. Within private chambers, conversations did not always require lengthy persuasion. A powerful man might arrive already burdened with uncertainty about rivals, alliances, or the loyalty of those around him. In these moments, a single remark delivered at the right time could linger in his mind long after the conversation ended. A mistress who understood this atmosphere did not need to challenge opinions directly. Open confrontation would have drawn attention to her presence and risked crossing the delicate boundary between companionship and interference. Instead, influence often appeared through suggestion rather than debate. Sometimes the most effective method involved saying very little. If a powerful man spoke about a courtier he admired, the mistress might respond only with a thoughtful pause or a small question. The remark might seem harmless, perhaps asking whether the man in question had always shown such loyalty. The conversation could move on quickly, but the doubt introduced in that moment might remain. In Tudor politics, doubt rarely disappeared easily. Courtiers already lived in an environment shaped by rivalry and ambition. Trust was often fragile, and alliances shifted according to circumstance. A suggestion that someone might not be entirely dependable could slowly reshape how that person was perceived. The process rarely appeared dramatic. No accusation needed to be spoken directly. Instead, suspicion developed gradually, reinforced by later observations and whispers circulating through the court. Silence often allowed this process to continue without attracting attention. A mistress who refrained from repeating a concern might appear discreet rather than manipulative. By avoiding direct criticism, she maintained the impression that she was not attempting to influence political matters. At the same time, the initial doubt she introduced could continue working quietly in the background. Observers within the court sometimes noticed these subtle changes. A courtier who once enjoyed easy access to a powerful household might begin receiving fewer invitations. Conversations that previously flowed comfortably could become cautious. The atmosphere surrounding that person shifted almost imperceptibly. Rarely did anyone trace these changes back to a single private conversation. In many ways, silence created space for imagination. When a powerful man began questioning the loyalty or character of someone around him, he often searched for confirmation within his own observations. Small incidents that once seemed insignificant could suddenly appear suspicious. The original suggestion no longer needed to be repeated. This subtle method of influence reflected the environment of the Tudor court itself. Authority rested in the hands of men who valued loyalty but constantly feared betrayal. Ministers guarded their positions. Nobles competed for favor. And servants carried rumors through corridors where every whisper might matter. Within such an atmosphere, even a minor doubt could travel far. A mistress who understood this dynamic could shape the emotional climate around a powerful man without appearing to interfere directly. Her role remained private and informal. Yet the consequences of those private conversations sometimes reached far beyond the room where they occurred. At the same time, this form of influence remained extremely delicate. The same silence that allowed doubt to grow could also conceal resentment if others suspected manipulation. Courtiers watched one another carefully, and any sign that someone outside the official hierarchy was shaping opinion could create hostility. For this reason, successful influence often required restraint. The mistress, who spoke rarely but thoughtfully, maintained the appearance of discretion. Her remarks appeared casual rather than strategic. Her silence suggested modesty rather than calculation. Through this careful balance, she could remain close to power without provoking immediate resistance. This quiet method of influence illustrates how Tudor politics extended beyond formal authority. Decisions did not always originate from councils or proclamations. They often began with impressions formed during personal conversations, where emotion and reflection blended together. Within that environment, silence could act as a powerful instrument. A single unanswered question might grow into suspicion. A brief pause could signal doubt. An unspoken concern might shape how a powerful man interpreted the behavior of those around him. Over time, these small shifts could alter the atmosphere of an entire court. Influence in Tudor courts did not always depend on loud argument or public authority. Sometimes a quiet suggestion or an unanswered question was enough to plant uncertainty in a powerful mind. From that uncertainty, changes in loyalty and favour could slowly begin to spread through the court. In Tudor society, the attention of a powerful man could transform a woman's life with remarkable speed. Favour brought comfort, protection, and proximity to influence. A mistress who attracted such attention might suddenly find herself surrounded by gifts, better clothing, and rooms closer to the centre of a noble household. Servants adjusted their behaviour, and courtiers began to notice her presence. For a time, this attention could feel stable. The routines of daily life might create the impression that the relationship had settled into something lasting. Evenings spent in conversation, familiar patterns of visits, and the quiet acceptance of others within the household could suggest that the arrangement had become permanent. Yet beneath that appearance lay a fragile reality. Unlike marriage, affection did not create a structure that could endure changes in emotion. The favour of a powerful man depended entirely on his personal interest. When that interest changed, the position built upon it could vanish quickly. In a world where men controlled property, titles, and reputation, their choices shaped the stability of everyone around them. A man who once devoted attention to a particular woman might later shift his focus toward new concerns. Political pressures, family expectations, or simple changes in personal feeling could redirect his priorities. For the mistress whose life depended on that attention, such changes carried enormous consequences. The transition rarely announced itself openly. At first, it might appear as a small difference in routine. Invitations arrived less frequently. Conversations grew shorter. A meeting that once occurred regularly might be postponed or quietly forgotten. These subtle changes often marked the beginning of distance. Within the environment of the Tudor court, observers noticed such shifts quickly. Servants recognized changes in patterns of visits. Courtiers, who had once spoken freely in the presence of a favoured woman, might begin to treat her more cautiously. Rumours circulated easily through corridors, where every sign of changing favour attracted interest. The mistress herself often sensed the shift before anyone spoke about it directly. Moments of silence where conversation had once been lively could feel unsettling. A familiar presence might become distracted or distant. The emotional atmosphere surrounding the relationship gradually altered, leaving uncertainty where confidence once existed. This uncertainty reflected the absence of long-term commitment. A wife possessed legal protection through marriage, family alliances, and religious recognition. A mistress possessed none of these safeguards. Her comfort and security rested entirely on personal favour, and personal favour could not be guaranteed. In many cases, the man whose attention had once provided stability did not necessarily intend harm. His priorities simply changed. Political responsibilities, new alliances, or the arrival of another companion could reshape the direction of his attention. For him, such adjustments might appear natural. For the woman whose life depended on that attention, they could feel devastating. The absence of formal commitment meant that the future remained uncertain from the beginning. Gifts, affection, and companionship might create the appearance of security, but none of those gestures formed a lasting contract. They existed only within the present moment. Tudor society understood this reality, even if it rarely spoke about it openly. Courtiers observed how quickly favour could rise and fall. A woman who once seemed indispensable might disappear from daily conversation within weeks. Her rooms could be reassigned. Her presence no longer requested at gatherings that once welcomed her. The court itself moved forward with little pause. This environment encouraged caution among those who lived close to power. A mistress who wished to remain secure had to remain attentive to changes in mood and circumstance. Maintaining favour required constant awareness of the emotional landscape surrounding the relationship, even with careful attention. However, permanence remained impossible. The very nature of personal affection made it unpredictable. What began as admiration could gradually turn into indifference. The comfort of familiarity might give way to curiosity about someone new. In Tudor courts, this pattern repeated itself many times. Observers might notice the same cycle unfolding again and again. A woman rose quickly through the attention of a powerful man, enjoyed a period of closeness to influence, and eventually found herself replaced by another presence. Each stage of the cycle appeared almost inevitable. The fragility of favour formed the central paradox of a mistress's life. The same affection that lifted her near the centre of power also exposed her to sudden change. Nothing prevented the emotional foundation of that position from shifting. When it did, everything surrounding it could collapse just as quietly as it had appeared. The favour of a powerful man could elevate a mistress to a life of comfort and influence within the Tudor court. Yet that favour rested entirely on personal feeling rather than law or obligation. In a world where priorities could shift without warning, the security built on affection alone was always uncertain. Property formed the foundation of security in Tudor society. Land, houses, income from estates, and valuable possessions defined the stability of a household and the future of its family line. Ownership determined who held authority and who possessed protection against hardship. Families guarded these assets carefully because they represented continuity across generations. Within a lawful marriage, property carried a clear structure. The husband usually controlled the estates. Yet the marriage itself created a recognized connection between the wife and the wealth surrounding the household. Documents, contracts, and family records confirmed that the union existed within the boundaries of law and religion. Children born within that union gained unquestioned legitimacy and, therefore, the right to inherit. This legal recognition created long-term security. A wife might not hold the deeds to land in her own name, but her position within marriage ensured that the household's wealth remained tied to her future and to the future of her children. The structure of inheritance protected the continuity of the family and reinforced her place within it. The situation surrounding a mistress was entirely different. She could appear surrounded by comfort and luxury, fine clothing, jewelry, and generous allowances sometimes accompanied the attention of a powerful man. In some cases, a residence might be arranged for her within the grounds of an estate or in a nearby town. Servants might attend to her needs, and the environment around her could resemble the lifestyle of someone securely established within noble society. Yet much of this comfort rested on temporary arrangements. Property rarely appeared legally under the mistress's name. Land records and contracts rarely acknowledged her as an owner. Even gifts offered with affection often remained informal, unrecorded in the legal documents that defined ownership. These items could be generous, but generosity did not carry the same protection as law. Without official ownership, the resources surrounding her life could disappear quickly. A change in circumstances could alter everything. Rooms within a household might be reassigned to another member of the family. Servants who once attended her could be directed elsewhere. Allowances might quietly stop arriving. The environment that once seemed stable could dissolve without any formal explanation. This uncertainty extended to children born from such relationships. Legitimacy determined inheritance in Tudor England. A child born within marriage carried the father's name and became part of the legal chain through which property passed from one generation to the next. Titles, estates, and family reputation depended on that chain, remaining clear and undisputed. Children born outside marriage stood outside that structure. Some fathers chose to acknowledge these children privately. They might provide financial support, arrange education, or place the child within another household where care could be provided. These actions reflected personal affection rather than legal obligation. Even when support existed, the child's future remained uncertain. Without formal legitimacy, inheritance rights rarely extended to these children. Noble families protected their estates carefully, and the law favoured those born within recognised unions. Titles and land followed strict lines designed to prevent disputes over succession. Because of this, a mistress raising a child could not rely on the same protections available to a lawful wife. The father's goodwill determined much of the child's future. As long as affection remained strong, assistance might continue. If attention shifted elsewhere, that support could weaken or disappear. The absence of legal commitment left both mother and child vulnerable to changes in circumstance. Within the Tudor court, observers understood these risks, even if they rarely spoke about them openly. A mistress might appear prosperous while favour remained strong. Yet everyone recognized that her comfort depended on a fragile foundation. Wealth surrounded her, but did not necessarily belong to her. This distinction shaped how many mistresses approached their lives. Some attempted to secure small forms of protection by saving gifts or building quiet alliances with individuals who might assist them in the future. Others relied entirely on the continued generosity of the man whose affection sustained their position. Neither approach offered the same stability as marriage. The legal framework of Tudor society simply did not extend the same protections to relationships outside recognized unions. Property and inheritance remained tied to legitimacy, and legitimacy required marriage. Because of this structure, the life of a mistress unfolded within a temporary world created by affection and maintained by personal favor. As long as that favor continued, comfort and opportunity remained close at hand. Once it disappeared, the same comforts could vanish just as quietly. Courts had witnessed this pattern many times. Women who once lived near the center of influence sometimes faded from attention when relationships changed. Their names rarely appeared in records, and the resources that once supported them returned easily to the households where they legally belonged. This quiet disappearance revealed how fragile unofficial security could be. Property and inheritance defined stability in Tudor society. Yet a mistress rarely possessed legal ownership of the wealth surrounding her life. The comfort she enjoyed depended largely on personal favor rather than recognized rights. When that favor shifted, the protection offered by property and inheritance could disappear with surprising speed. Reputation carried enormous weight in Tudor society. Honor shaped how individuals were received in households, how families formed alliances, and how communities judged personal character. A person's public image could influence opportunities, friendships, and even political stability. For women, reputation held particular importance because it often defined their entire place within society. The expectations placed upon women were strict and clearly understood. A respectable woman was expected to appear modest, loyal, and devoted to the household she belonged to. Her behavior reflected not only her own character, but also the honor of her family and husband. Because of this, any suggestion of scandal could quickly attract attention. For a mistress, reputation existed in a far more delicate state. Even when her relationship remained widely known within private circles, society rarely treated it with open acceptance. The lawful structure of marriage remained the official ideal, and any relationship outside that structure created tension. People might tolerate such arrangements quietly, yet they rarely viewed them with admiration. Rumours formed easily in this environment. The Tudor court functioned as a place where observation and conversation never stopped. Servants carried stories between rooms. Courtiers whispered about the movements of influential figures, and visitors brought news from other households. In such a setting, small details often grew into elaborate narratives. A glance during a gathering, a gift delivered too publicly, or an evening visit noticed by the wrong observer could become the beginning of a rumor. Once rumors appeared, they moved quickly. A mistress often found herself described in ways that reduced her identity to a single accusation. Instead of being seen as an individual with her own experiences and motives, she might be labeled simply as a disruptive presence within another household. The complexity of her relationship disappeared behind a simplified narrative. Many people viewed the mistress as someone who threatened the stability of marriage. From this perspective, she appeared not merely as a companion to a powerful man, but as a figure capable of disturbing the harmony of a family. The wife represented legitimacy, tradition, and order. The mistress, by contrast, seemed to challenge those values simply by existing near the same center of attention. This interpretation often ignored the reality that the relationship depended equally on the choices of the man involved. Instead, blame frequently settled on the woman. The language surrounding such situations reflected this imbalance. A mistress might be described as manipulative, ambitious, or morally suspect. Her presence became a convenient explanation for tensions within the household. Observers rarely questioned the authority of the man who maintained the relationship. The result was a reputation built on suspicion. Unlike a wife, the mistress possessed few ways to defend herself against these accusations. Marriage created a structure that allowed a wife's family and social network to support her position. Relatives, allies, and even legal institutions could intervene if her reputation came under attack. A mistress lacked these protections. Her relationship existed outside the official framework recognized by law and religion. Because of this, she had no formal mechanism through which to challenge damaging rumors. If a courtier repeated a harmful story or a household began to treat her with hostility, she had little authority to demand fairness. The absence of legal protection left her exposed to public opinion. In Tudor society, public opinion could influence decisions quickly. A powerful man concerned about his reputation might distance himself from a relationship that began attracting too much attention. Maintaining the appearance of order within the household often mattered more than defending the private truth of the situation. This pressure placed the mistress in a vulnerable position. The same relationship that brought her close to comfort and influence also made her a visible target for criticism. Observers who wished to defend the honor of marriage could easily portray her as the cause of conflict. Within the crowded environment of the court, such portrayals spread easily. Even people who had once treated her with courtesy might begin to behave cautiously. Invitations could become less frequent. Conversations might grow guarded. The subtle changes that followed a damaged reputation often signaled that the court itself had begun to withdraw its acceptance. For a woman whose security depended on personal favor rather than legal recognition, this shift could become dangerous. Without formal protection, her reputation functioned as her only defense. Once that reputation weakened, the fragile balance allowing her to remain near power could collapse quickly. The court rarely paused to question the fairness of such outcomes. Its primary concern remained the preservation of order and legitimacy. In Tudor society, reputation shaped how every relationship was judged, and a mistress stood especially vulnerable to the power of rumor. Accusations could spread quickly in a court where observation and gossip never stopped. When suspicion began to surround her name, the absence of legal protection left her with little defense against the tide of public opinion. Courts in Tudor England often appeared welcoming at first glance. Noble halls were filled with conversation, laughter, and the constant movement of visitors arriving from different regions. Courtiers greeted one another with practiced politeness, and the atmosphere suggested a place where influence and opportunity could flourish. For a mistress who had recently gained favor, this environment could feel almost reassuring. At the beginning of such relationships, acceptance sometimes appeared surprisingly easy. People within the court rarely confronted delicate matters openly. As long as a powerful man continued to show interest in a particular woman, many courtiers behaved as though the arrangement belonged to the quiet customs of noble life. Invitations continued. Servants remained respectful, and daily routines moved forward with little visible tension. This appearance of tolerance created the impression that the court had accepted her presence. A mistress might walk through corridors where courtiers nodded politely. She might attend gatherings where conversation flowed comfortably around her. Observers who noticed the relationship often remained discreet, choosing silence over confrontation. Yet this quiet acceptance rested on unstable ground. The Tudor court valued reputation and order above almost everything else. As long as a relationship remained discreet, and did not disturb the public image of a household. Many people chose to ignore it. Silence allowed the court to preserve the appearance of stability. But the same environment that tolerated the relationship could turn against it quickly. Rumors, accusations, or political tensions sometimes changed the atmosphere without warning. When suspicion began to circulate more openly, the court's attitude often shifted with surprising speed. The people who once remained silent might begin to distance themselves. This transformation rarely appeared dramatic at first. A greeting that once felt warm might become brief and formal. Invitations that once arrived regularly might quietly stop. Conversations that once flowed easily could grow cautious. These small changes signaled that the environment surrounding the mistress had begun to alter. Courts functioned as communities where reputation traveled quickly. Once a damaging story gained attention, individuals often reacted by protecting their own position. Associating too closely with a controversial figure could invite unwanted scrutiny. As a result, distance became a form of protection. Courtiers, who once treated the mistress with courtesy, might begin avoiding her presence during gatherings. Servants might behave more carefully, uncertain about how the household's mood had changed. Even individuals who privately felt sympathy often remained silent to avoid becoming involved. This withdrawal created a powerful sense of isolation. The court that once seemed welcoming could suddenly feel cold and unfamiliar. Familiar corridors became spaces where conversations stopped when she entered. Faces that once showed curiosity or politeness now revealed hesitation. These changes reflected more than simple social discomfort. Tudor society believed strongly in maintaining the appearance of order within noble households. When a relationship threatened to create a scandal, many people concluded that removing the source of tension would restore stability. Blame frequently fell on the person with the least official protection. For a mistress, that position was almost inevitable. Observers often described her as the cause of the disruption, rather than acknowledging the shared responsibility of the man involved. The narrative surrounding the scandal tended to simplify events, presenting the mistress as the figure who had disturbed the harmony of the household. Once that narrative spread, defending oneself became extremely difficult. The absence of legal recognition left her with few options. She could not appeal to family alliances in the same way a lawful wife could. She possessed no formal authority within the household that allowed her to challenge accusations publicly. Instead, she relied on the continued support of the man whose attention had first brought her into the court. If that support weakened under the pressure of public opinion, her position could deteriorate quickly. A powerful man concerned about preserving his reputation might distance himself from the controversy rather than defend the relationship openly. This moment often marked the turning point. The court, which had once tolerated the relationship through silence, now expressed its judgment through withdrawal. Conversations changed, alliances shifted, and the environment surrounding the mistress grew increasingly hostile. What once appeared to be a place of opportunity revealed itself as a space governed by reputation and caution. The transformation could happen quietly, yet its consequences were unmistakable. A Tudor court could welcome a favoured woman with polite smiles and careful silence while the relationship remained convenient. The same court could become distant and cold once rumours began to threaten its sense of order. In a place where reputation shaped every decision, even a single accusation could close doors that once seemed permanently open. Marriage in Tudor society functioned as far more than a personal relationship between two individuals. It created a structured connection between families, estates, and political alliances that shaped the stability of noble life. When a woman became a lawful wife, she entered a system that provided recognition, protection, and continuity. This structure formed the foundation of her security within the household and the wider community. Behind every noble marriage stood a network of families. These families often negotiated the union long before the wedding ceremony took place. Land ownership, inheritance expectations, and political cooperation influenced the decision to unite two households. Once the marriage occurred, The connection extended beyond the couple themselves. Relatives from both sides gained a shared interest in preserving the stability of the union. This network created a powerful form of protection. If a wife faced difficulty within her household, her family possessed the authority to intervene. Brothers, uncles, and influential relatives could defend her reputation or negotiate solutions when conflicts appeared. Their involvement reminded everyone that the marriage represented more than a private arrangement. It represented an alliance between families. This collective support distinguished the position of a wife from that of a mistress. A mistress often relied on the personal favor of a single man, but a wife stood within a structure supported by many individuals who valued the continuation of the alliance. Law reinforced this structure. In Tudor England, the legal system recognized marriage as the legitimate foundation of family life. Contracts, dowries, and property agreements often accompanied noble unions, establishing clear expectations regarding inheritance and financial responsibilities. These documents did more than record personal commitments. They protected the continuity of estates and family titles. Through the law, the wife gained a recognized place within this framework. Although husbands often controlled household property, the wife's presence within the marriage secured her connection to that wealth. Her children, born within the lawful union, possessed unquestioned legitimacy and therefore the right to inherit titles and estates. This legal clarity strengthened the wife's position within both families. Religion strengthened this authority even further. The Church viewed marriage as a sacred union, and its approval granted spiritual legitimacy to the relationship. Religious ceremonies formally acknowledged the bond between husband and wife, presenting the union as part of a moral and social order that society was expected to respect. Because of this recognition, the wife's position carried moral weight. Challenging the authority of a lawful marriage could appear not only socially disruptive but also morally questionable. Religious doctrine reinforced the idea that the marital union formed the proper foundation of family life. As a result, many members of the community instinctively supported the wife's position during moments of conflict. Beyond family alliances and legal authority, the wife also held a visible role within court life. Ceremonies, gatherings, and public appearances often placed her in positions that reflected her recognized status. She attended formal events beside her husband, represented the household during important occasions, and participated in rituals that displayed the continuity of noble families. These public roles made her presence unmistakable. While a mistress might remain associated with private spaces, the wife appeared openly within the ceremonial life of the court. Her visibility reinforced the legitimacy of the marriage and reminded observers of the structured hierarchy governing noble households. Every ritual strengthened this perception. When guests entered a great hall or attended a court gathering, they understood the positions assigned to different individuals. The wife occupied a clearly defined place within that arrangement. Her presence confirmed the order that allowed the household to function smoothly within the wider political world. This visibility also reinforced her authority. People within the household understood that the wife represented the lawful center of the family structure. Servants, relatives, and allies recognized her position and responded accordingly. Even when personal tensions existed behind closed doors, the ceremonial framework of society continued to affirm her role. Because of this layered protection, the wife's status rarely depended on personal affection alone. Even if emotional bonds between husband and wife weakened over time, the structure surrounding the marriage remained intact. Families, law, religion, and public ceremony continued to support the union because it served broader interests than individual feelings. For a mistress observing this arrangement, the contrast could be striking. Her relationship might contain moments of influence or intimacy, yet it lacked the formal recognition that surrounded the wife. The wife's position rested on foundations built through generations of tradition and agreement. Those foundations proved difficult to challenge. They connected the private life of a household to the larger systems that governed Tudor society: family alliances, legal authority, religious approval, and ceremonial roles all combined to reinforce the wife's place within the structure of power. In Tudor society, the lawful wife stood at the centre of a structure supported by family alliances, legal recognition, and religious authority. Her position appeared publicly through ceremonies and rituals that reinforced the legitimacy of the marriage. This powerful framework created stability around her role within the household and the wider court. Within Tudor households, authority did not exist only through men who held titles and property. Women also formed quiet networks that shaped the balance of power inside noble families. These alliances rarely appeared openly in political discussions, yet they influenced daily life in ways that were both subtle and effective. When a lawful wife entered a powerful household, she did not stand alone. Behind her often stood a circle of women connected by blood, marriage, and shared interest in protecting the stability of the family. Mothers, sisters, cousins, and trusted companions observed the life of the household closely. Their presence created a social environment that could either support or resist the influence of outsiders. A mistress entering this world often encountered that network quickly. The mother of the husband frequently played an important role within the household hierarchy. Older noble women possessed experience, authority, and deep loyalty to the family's reputation. They had witnessed the fragile balance between personal desire and political stability throughout their lives. Because of this experience, they often watched new relationships carefully. If a mistress appeared to threaten the harmony of the marriage or the reputation of the family, these older women sometimes responded with quiet resistance. Their influence rarely appeared through confrontation. Instead, it emerged through guidance, conversation, and the subtle shaping of opinion. Family loyalty encouraged them to defend the wife's position. Noble families viewed marriage as an alliance designed to protect their lineage and estates. When a mistress entered the household, she could appear as a disturbance within that carefully arranged structure. Protecting the wife, therefore, became part of protecting the family itself. Relatives who visited the court often reinforced this perspective. Aunts, cousins, and other noble women might gather during court events, ceremonies, or private meetings. Within these gatherings, conversations sometimes revealed concern about the reputation of the household. Words exchanged quietly between women could influence how others within the court interpreted the situation. These discussions rarely sounded dramatic. Instead, they moved through polite remarks and cautious observations. A small comment about propriety, a reminder of family expectations, or a reflection on public reputation could shape the tone of an entire conversation. Over time, these remarks helped establish a shared understanding that the lawful wife represented the legitimate center of the household. Women within the court also formed friendships that carried their own influence. Ladies-in-waiting, companions, and noble women who attended court regularly spent long hours together. Their conversations extended beyond personal matters into observations about the behavior of influential figures. Because of this constant interaction, opinions formed quickly and circulated easily. A mistress who attracted too much attention sometimes became the subject of these discussions. Once a group of respected women expressed concern about her presence, the atmosphere around her could shift. Invitations might become less frequent, conversations more guarded, and social support more limited. The change rarely required open hostility. Quiet agreement was often enough. Servants within the household formed another important part of this network. Many servants held deep loyalty to the lawful wife because their positions depended on the stability of the household she represented. Maids, attendants, and senior household staff observed daily routines closely. They understood which relationships strengthened the household and which ones created tension. Their loyalty often expressed itself through small actions, Information moved carefully through corridors and kitchens. Messages might be delivered promptly to the wife, while other details remained unspoken when the mistress appeared nearby. The rhythm of service itself could reflect the household's priorities. Through these small choices, servants reinforced the authority of the lawful wife. This combination of family alliances, court friendships, and loyal servants created a quiet coalition that protected the structure of marriage. No formal agreement defined this alliance, yet its presence shaped how people behaved within the household. A mistress, therefore, entered an environment where influence did not belong solely to the powerful man whose attention she received. She faced a complex network of relationships designed to maintain order within the family. Each member of that network had a reason to support the wife's position. Protecting the marriage preserved reputation, inheritance, and the social balance of the court. Because these alliances operated quietly, their strength often remained invisible until tension appeared. A mistress might initially believe that personal favor offered enough protection. Over time, however, the subtle resistance surrounding her could become increasingly noticeable. Invitations changed. Conversations shifted, and the atmosphere within the household grew less welcoming. These changes reflected the quiet power of collective loyalty. Noble households in Tudor England often contained networks of women who quietly defended the stability of marriage. Mothers, relatives, court companions, and loyal servants shared an interest in protecting the lawful wife's position. When their quiet alliance formed around her, the presence of a mistress could begin to feel increasingly unwelcome. Royal courts during the Tudor era did not operate only as places of personal relationships and daily ceremonies. They also functioned as centers of diplomacy, where decisions could affect entire kingdoms. Alliances between nations depended on reputation, stability, and the image presented by the ruling household. Because of this, the private lives of powerful men sometimes became matters of political importance. Marriage played a crucial role in maintaining diplomatic balance. When a king or nobleman entered a formal marriage, the union often represented an agreement between families, territories, or even foreign courts. A queen or noble wife symbolized stability because her position connected multiple interests at once. Her presence reassured allies that the political structure surrounding the ruler remained orderly and reliable. This expectation shaped how the court responded to situations that threatened that appearance. A mistress might exist quietly within the private life of a powerful man without attracting serious attention at first. As long as the relationship remained discreet, many observers tolerated it as a common feature of aristocratic life. Personal attachments did not necessarily disturb the broader political environment. The situation changed when public reputation became involved. Foreign envoys visiting the Tudor court observed not only official ceremonies but also the behavior of influential figures within the royal household. Diplomats carried these observations back to their own rulers, shaping how other kingdoms understood the stability of England's leadership. Because of this scrutiny, the personal reputation of a king or nobleman could influence diplomatic negotiations. If rumors suggested disorder within the household, foreign observers might interpret those stories as signs of political weakness. A scandal involving a mistress could raise doubts about the ruler's judgment or about the unity of his court. Even exaggerated rumors sometimes traveled quickly across Europe through diplomatic correspondence. This possibility made reputation a political concern. Negotiations between kingdoms required careful management of appearances. A ruler preparing for an important alliance needed to project authority, discipline, and stability. Every public detail surrounding the royal household contributed to that image. In this environment, a controversial relationship could become a problem. Advisors and ministers responsible for diplomatic strategy often paid close attention to anything that might damage the court's reputation. If gossip about a mistress began to attract widespread attention, those advisors sometimes viewed the situation as a distraction from more important political objectives. Protecting the interests of the state often became the priority. For the individuals involved, this moment could transform a private relationship into a public issue. The same affection that once seemed harmless might suddenly appear dangerous when viewed through the lens of international diplomacy. At such moments, the mistress could become a symbol of instability. Even if she had never attempted to influence political affairs directly, her presence might be interpreted as a threat to the orderly image the court wished to present. Observers outside the kingdom might misunderstand the relationship or exaggerate its significance. Within the court itself, this interpretation could shift attitudes quickly. Advisors concerned about the success of negotiations might encourage the ruler to distance himself from the controversy. Courtiers aware of diplomatic tension often followed the same reasoning. Maintaining a stable appearance became more important than protecting a personal attachment. The mistress, therefore, found herself caught between private affection and public expectation. Her relationship with a powerful man might have developed quietly, shaped by personal feelings rather than political ambition. Yet once the court viewed the situation through the lens of diplomacy, her role changed. She became associated with risk. Removing that risk sometimes seemed like the simplest solution for those responsible for managing the kingdom's reputation. Encouraging distance between the ruler and the mistress restored the image of stability that diplomats expected to see. For the ruler himself, the decision could be complicated. Personal loyalty or affection might conflict with the responsibilities attached to his position. However, the expectations of advisors, allies, and foreign observers often carried enormous weight. Preserving the authority of the crown required maintaining the confidence of both domestic and international audiences. Under these pressures, personal relationships sometimes gave way to political necessity. The mistress who once enjoyed attention within the private life of the court could suddenly find herself excluded from the spaces she had once occupied. Invitations disappeared. Communication grew distant. And the routines that once brought her close to influence quietly changed. These shifts rarely required dramatic announcements. The court simply redirected its attention toward restoring the image of order expected by the wider political world. Diplomacy, negotiation, and alliances continued to dominate the priorities of those in power. In that process, the mistress became an inconvenient reminder of a moment when personal life and political responsibility collided. Her story revealed how fragile unofficial influence could be within a system governed by alliances and reputation. The same environment that allowed private relationships to exist quietly also demanded that they disappear when they threatened the political balance. Tudor courts balanced personal relationships with the demands of diplomacy and international reputation. When rumors about a mistress began to threaten that balance, advisors often viewed the relationship as a political liability. At moments when alliances, negotiations, and royal reputation mattered most, the quiet removal of a mistress could appear to many within the court as the simplest solution. Attention in the Tudor court could transform a person's life almost overnight. Favor from a powerful man opened doors that remained closed to most people. Rooms within noble residences became accessible. Servants offered respectful greetings, and courtiers observed the favored woman with a mixture of curiosity and caution. For a mistress who had recently entered such a position, the sudden change could feel overwhelming. The court noticed everything: movements through corridors, appearances at gatherings, and the smallest gestures exchanged between influential figures quickly attracted attention. When a mistress gained the interest of a king or powerful nobleman, that attention became impossible to ignore. Her presence began to carry meaning far beyond her own intentions. People watched her carefully. Courtiers measured her position through subtle signals, invitations to banquets, the quality of her clothing, and the servants assigned to assist her all suggested how strong the man's favor remained. Each detail revealed how close she stood to the center of influence within the household. During the early stages of such a relationship, curiosity often dominated the atmosphere. Guests whispered about the woman who had captured the attention of someone powerful. Some observers admired the sudden rise in her fortunes. while others simply studied the situation with interest. The court thrived on stories, and a new relationship provided endless material for conversation. For a time, that attention could feel almost flattering. People greeted her with courtesy. Doors opened easily. Her name appeared in conversations that once would never have included her. Within the great halls of Tudor households, recognition itself carried a form of power. Yet the same attention that elevated her position could also become a source of danger. The court valued stability above personal excitement. When curiosity about a relationship began to evolve into concern about reputation, the tone of conversation shifted. What once appeared as an interesting story could begin to resemble a threat to the order surrounding the household. This transformation rarely occurred suddenly. At first, the change appeared in small ways. Observers who once spoke openly about the relationship began choosing their words more carefully. Courtiers who once seemed amused by the situation started considering how it might affect alliances or negotiations. Gradually, curiosity gave way to caution. The favored woman who once attracted attention for her closeness to power now drew attention for another reason. People began to wonder whether the relationship might damage the reputation of the household or complicate political matters. This shift changed how others perceived her presence. A mistress who once seemed fascinating could suddenly appear troublesome. Courtiers who had treated her warmly might begin maintaining distance. Servants who once hurried to assist her could become more reserved. Conversations that once included her name now mentioned it with hesitation. The atmosphere surrounding her slowly altered. In Tudor society, reputation influenced every relationship within the court. If a favored woman began to attract criticism or suspicion, her presence could threaten the image of order that powerful families worked carefully to maintain. Advisors concerned with protecting that image sometimes encouraged caution. A relationship once tolerated quietly could begin to appear inconvenient. For the man involved, this moment created a difficult balance between personal loyalty and public responsibility. The same affection that once felt harmless might now carry consequences that extended beyond private life. Courtiers often interpreted these situations in practical terms. If maintaining the relationship threatened the stability of the household or the reputation of the court, removing the source of controversy could seem like the simplest path toward restoring order. Such reasoning did not necessarily reflect cruelty. Instead, it reflected the priorities of a society that valued stability above personal attachment. Within that environment, the mistress found her position changing once again. Only a short time earlier, she had stood near the center of attention. Her presence attracted curiosity and conversation. Now the same presence risked becoming a problem others wished to avoid. The contrast could feel striking. One day, she might walk through the halls of the court, surrounded by interest and quiet admiration. Next, she might sense hesitation in the greetings she received. Familiar faces looked away more quickly. Conversations paused when she approached. These subtle signals revealed a deeper shift. The court no longer viewed her simply as the favored companion of a powerful man. Instead, it began to treat her as a potential source of tension within the carefully balanced structure of noble society. Such changes did not require formal announcements. They appeared through gestures, distance, and silence. The court rarely spoke directly about these transitions, yet everyone within its walls understood their meaning. In this way, a mistress could move quickly from admiration to isolation. The attention that once lifted her into prominence gradually transformed into scrutiny. Her presence, once welcomed, now carried the weight of controversy. The same court that once celebrated her rise began preparing quietly for her disappearance. A woman who once stood at the center of attention could quickly become a burden within the cautious world of the Tudor court. Favor that once brought admiration gradually turned into suspicion as reputation and stability took priority. The moment the court chose order and reputation over personal attachment, the path from prominence to silence could become very short. Pregnancy carried a powerful meaning in Tudor society. The birth of a child was never viewed as only a private event between two individuals. Instead, it shaped inheritance, family alliances, and the long-term future of noble households. When a woman became pregnant, her position within the social structure often changed immediately. For a lawful wife, pregnancy strengthened stability. A child confirmed the continuation of the family line and reassured relatives that the marriage had fulfilled its central purpose. The arrival of a son carried particular importance because inheritance laws favored male heirs. Families often celebrated such births with ceremonies and public acknowledgement. The situation surrounding a mistress could feel very different. When a mistress became pregnant, the news carried both opportunity and danger. On one hand, the child created a deeper connection between herself and the powerful man involved. A child, especially a son, might increase the attention he gave to her, which could lead to greater financial support. Some fathers chose to acknowledge these children openly. They might arrange education, provide a household where the child could grow up comfortably, or even grant property that ensured a stable future. In certain cases, the existence of such a child strengthened the bond between father and mother because responsibility created a lasting connection. Yet the same pregnancy also attracted attention from the court. News travelled quickly within Tudor households. Servants noticed physical changes. Attendants whispered about rumours, and courtiers observed subtle shifts in behaviour. Once pregnancy became known, the relationship between the mistress and the powerful man involved often gained greater visibility. This visibility created tension. For the lawful wife and her family, the presence of a child born outside the marriage could appear threatening. Even if the child possessed no legal claim to inheritance, the situation raised uncomfortable questions. It reminded everyone that the private life of the household had become complicated. Relatives concerned about family reputation sometimes reacted strongly. They feared that recognition of an illegitimate child might weaken the authority of the lawful marriage. A son born outside that structure could attract sympathy or attention that the wife's family considered inappropriate. Protecting the legitimacy of the official line remained the priority. Because of this concern, pregnancy could intensify existing conflicts. Courtiers who already questioned the presence of the mistress might begin speaking more openly about the situation. Rumours could spread quickly through the court, transforming private events into subjects of public discussion. Each conversation added pressure to a relationship that was already fragile. The mistress, therefore, faced a complicated reality. A child could deepen her connection to the powerful man whose favour had once elevated her position. At the same time, that same child could attract hostility from those who believed the relationship threatened the stability of the household. In Tudor society, children born outside marriage occupied an uncertain place. Some were acknowledged and supported by their fathers, while others lived quietly in households far from the court. Their futures depended largely on the decisions of powerful men and the willingness of families to tolerate their presence. For the mother, this uncertainty created constant tension. The birth of a son might increase the importance of her relationship temporarily, yet it did not guarantee lasting security. Without legal recognition through marriage, both mother and child remained outside the structure that protected legitimate heirs. Political interests sometimes complicated the situation further. A child connected to a powerful father could become a tool within family rivalries or court politics. Rumours about lineage, loyalty, and influence sometimes surrounded these children as they grew older. Even when they possessed no legal claim to inheritance, their existence could still affect relationships between powerful families. Because of this, pregnancy often forced the court to confront questions it preferred to avoid. What began as a private relationship now produced consequences that extended beyond personal affection. Advisors, relatives, and courtiers all interpreted the situation through the lens of reputation and stability. For the mistress herself, the experience combined hope with uncertainty. A child represented a personal bond that could not easily disappear. At the same time, the child also exposed her to greater scrutiny from those who believed the relationship should never have existed. In the carefully balanced world of Tudor households, such tensions were rarely resolved easily. Pregnancy could transform the life of a Tudor mistress by strengthening her connection to a powerful man while also increasing the attention of the court. The birth of a child, especially a son, sometimes raised her political value, yet also intensified suspicion and conflict within the household. Behind the quiet corridors of the court, a single child could turn a private relationship into a source of lasting tension. Life in a Tudor court depended heavily on visibility, presence at banquets, ceremonies, and gatherings determined who remained part of the social world surrounding power. Invitations were not simply gestures of hospitality. They represented recognition and acceptance within the hierarchy of the court. Being seen in these spaces confirmed that a person still belonged to the circle of influence. For someone whose position relied on personal favor, these invitations carried even greater meaning. A mistress who once attracted attention often appeared regularly at gatherings within noble households. Her presence signaled that the powerful man connected to her continued to recognize her importance. Courtiers observed these appearances because they revealed how relationships within the household were evolving. At first, the signs of change appeared quietly. A banquet might take place without her receiving an invitation. The explanation might seem harmless at the beginning. Perhaps the event involved only certain members of the household, or perhaps the guest list had been reduced. Small exclusions rarely caused immediate alarm. Yet these moments sometimes repeated themselves. Another gathering passed without her name appearing among the guests. A ceremony occurred where others attended while she remained absent. Each omission seemed minor when viewed individually, but together they formed a pattern that was difficult to ignore. Within the Tudor court, absence carried meaning. People noticed who appeared beside the powerful and who did not. A mistress, who once moved freely among the gatherings of the court, might suddenly find herself spending more time in private rooms. Servants delivered messages explaining that certain events were limited or reserved for others. Gradually, these explanations became familiar. Public appearances began to occur less frequently. Instead of standing beside influential figures during celebrations or ceremonies, she remained in quieter spaces away from the attention of the court. The difference between past and present became increasingly clear. Visibility slowly faded. Courtiers who once greeted her openly during gatherings now encountered her less often. Conversations that once occurred during lively events disappeared. The social rhythm that once connected her to the life of the court began to weaken. This change affected more than invitations. Friends and acquaintances within the court often adjusted their behavior as the situation evolved. Individuals who once shared casual conversations or friendly remarks might begin to speak more cautiously. Some chose to maintain distance to avoid being associated with controversy. Their hesitation reflected the priorities of the court. Reputation shaped every relationship within this environment. When someone's position became uncertain, others often protected themselves by stepping back. Maintaining a careful distance allowed them to avoid involvement in situations that might damage their own standing. For the mistress, these subtle changes created a growing sense of isolation. A corridor that once felt familiar could suddenly appear quiet and distant. Faces that once welcomed conversation now offered polite but brief greetings. The difference rarely involved open hostility. Instead, it appeared through restraint. Friends who once lingered during conversations might excuse themselves quickly. Invitations to informal gatherings stopped arriving. Even casual moments shared during daily routines became shorter and less frequent. The court rarely announced these changes directly. Silence and distance communicated the shift more clearly than any formal statement. Those who understood the customs of the court recognized the meaning behind these gestures. The woman whose presence had once attracted curiosity now seemed to drift toward the edges of social life. This process unfolded gradually. No single moment marked the beginning of isolation. Instead, it developed through repeated signals that her presence no longer carried the same importance it once had. Each missing invitation, each shortened conversation, and each cautious glance contributed to the change. Over time, the pattern became unmistakable. The court that once observed her with fascination now behaved as though she existed slightly outside its center. Gatherings continued. Celebrations filled the great halls, and conversations flowed among courtiers. Her absence slowly became normal. In Tudor society, belonging depended on participation in the shared life of the court. When participation faded, influence faded with it. Isolation rarely arrived suddenly, but once it began, it often continued quietly until the connection between the individual and the court weakened completely. Life within the Tudor court depended on presence, conversation, and shared gatherings that confirmed a person's place within the social order. As invitations disappeared and friendships grew cautious, a mistress could find herself slowly removed from the visible world of influence. Behind the quiet corridors of the court, this gradual isolation revealed how easily favor could fade into distance. Beauty held a powerful place in the social life of the Tudor court. Appearance influenced attention, admiration, and sometimes even opportunity. In an environment where people observed one another constantly, physical presence carried meaning beyond simple aesthetics. Clothing, posture, and youthful features could shape how others interpreted a person's place within the hierarchy of the court. For a mistress, beauty often formed the beginning of her influence. A striking appearance could draw the interest of powerful men and attract curiosity from the surrounding court. Elegant clothing, graceful movement, and youthful charm created an impression that lingered in the minds of observers. Within the halls of noble households, these qualities sometimes opened doors that would otherwise remain closed. The court responded quickly to such impressions. Courtiers noticed the woman who captured the attention of a powerful man. Conversations quietly referenced her appearance, her presence at gatherings, and the way others reacted when she entered a room. Admiration sometimes blended with fascination, creating an atmosphere where beauty appeared closely linked to influence. For a time, this advantage could feel secure. As long as attention remained strong, the mistress might move through the court, surrounded by curiosity and recognition. Her presence attracted glances during gatherings, and her connection to a powerful figure reinforced the sense that she belonged near the center of court life. Yet beauty carried a fragile foundation. Unlike titles, property, or legal recognition, youthful appearance cannot remain unchanged. Time moved quietly through the routines of daily life. Small changes in expression, posture, or complexion gradually altered how observers perceived a person. Within the Tudor court, such changes rarely escaped notice. The environment encouraged constant observation. People studied clothing, gestures, and facial expressions with careful attention. When a woman's appearance began to change, even slightly, the difference could attract quiet commentary. These observations were rarely spoken about openly. Instead, they appeared through subtle comparisons. A younger woman arriving at court might draw curiosity in the same way the mistress once had. Courtiers, who once focused their attention on her presence, could begin noticing someone new. The shift rarely occurred overnight. At first, the mistress might simply notice that conversations about beauty included other names more often. Guests at gatherings might comment on the elegance of a younger woman entering the room. These remarks seemed harmless, yet they hinted at a change in how the court distributed its attention. Gradually, the contrast became more visible. The mistress, who once represented youthful charm, now appeared beside individuals whose presence reflected the freshness of a new generation. Their energy and appearance captured the curiosity of observers who always sought something new to discuss. The court thrived on novelty. Relationships that once fascinated the court often lost their power to attract attention over time. As curiosity shifted toward newer figures, the mistress might discover that the admiration surrounding her had grown quieter. This transformation influenced how people responded to her presence. Courtiers, who once studied her appearance during gatherings, now directed their attention elsewhere. Conversations that once included praise for her elegance might focus instead on the arrival of someone younger. The change did not require cruelty or open rejection. It reflected the shifting interests of the court. For a mistress whose position relied on personal attraction rather than legal recognition, this shift could weaken the foundation of her influence. The qualities that once helped secure attention gradually lost their power as time moved forward. A powerful man who once felt captivated by her presence might begin noticing someone else. Such changes rarely involved sudden decisions. Instead, they developed through small adjustments in behavior and attention. The same court that once celebrated her beauty simply moved its curiosity toward another figure. For the mistress, this process could feel deeply unsettling. Beauty had once allowed her to stand near the center of attention. Now that the advantage had slowly faded, her position was more uncertain than before. Without the protection of marriage or legal recognition, the gradual loss of youthful charm sometimes exposed how fragile her place within the court had always been. In the quiet rhythm of Tudor life, time revealed the limits of influence built upon appearance alone. Youth and beauty once allowed a mistress to attract admiration within the watchful world of the Tudor court. As years passed and new faces appeared, the attention that once surrounded her slowly moved elsewhere. The fading of youthful charm revealed how easily a woman whose position depended on attraction could be replaced by someone younger. Power in the Tudor court often appeared dazzling from a distance. Rich fabrics, candlelit halls, and the constant movement of servants created an image of stability and grandeur. Those who stood close to powerful figures seemed protected by the strength of the household surrounding them. Yet the appearance of protection could sometimes hide a far more fragile reality. For a mistress, influence rarely came with formal recognition. Her closeness to power developed through personal affection rather than through legal titles or official ceremony. She might live within the orbit of royal attention, yet she remained outside the structures that protected those with lawful status. The difference between these positions was not always visible at first. Within the court, symbols carried enormous meaning. A crown represented authority that could not easily be challenged. Titles confirmed a person's place within the hierarchy of noble society. Marriage, recognized by both law and religion, established a secure position within the household. These symbols created boundaries that protected the people who possessed them. A mistress held none of these protections. Her relationship with a powerful man might place her near the center of attention. Yet it did not provide the official status that secured long-term safety. The court might watch her closely, but it did not grant her the symbols that defined legitimate authority. At first, this difference could remain hidden beneath daily routine. As long as the relationship remained strong, the mistress often moved through the court with a sense of belonging. Servants responded to her presence with respect. Courtiers greeted her politely. Her proximity to influence suggested a form of power that others noticed immediately. Yet this power existed without visible foundations. Unlike a queen or lawful wife, the mistress possessed no crown that symbolized her authority. She held no title that anchored her place within the noble hierarchy. Her influence depended entirely on a private relationship that could change without warning. The absence of formal protection gradually revealed itself through subtle moments. A decision made within the household might occur without her knowledge. A gathering might take place where her presence was no longer requested. Conversations among courtiers could shift towards subjects that no longer included her name. These moments reminded her that she did not control the structures surrounding the court. The queen, supported by marriage and ceremony, occupied a position that could not easily disappear. Her presence was tied to law, religion, and public recognition. Even when personal tensions existed behind the walls of the palace, the structure protecting her role remained intact. A mistress lived outside that structure. Her presence depended entirely on the continued interest of the man who had brought her close to influence. If that interest weakened, the court had no reason to preserve her position. Without titles, alliance, or ceremonial authority, she stood alone within a system built on hierarchy. Over time, this realization could become impossible to ignore. The great halls that once welcomed her presence now belonged clearly to others whose authority carried official recognition. The rituals and ceremonies of the court reinforced that difference. Each formal event reminded observers who truly possessed power within the structure of Tudor society. For the mistress, the contrast between past attention and present reality could feel striking. Memories of earlier moments might linger in the same spaces where she now walked quietly. She might remember conversations, gatherings, and gestures of admiration that once seemed permanent. Yet the court itself continued to move forward. New alliances formed, new relationships attracted attention, and the rhythms of court life continued without pause. The mistress, who once stood near the center of that world, gradually faded toward its edges. Without a crown, she possessed no symbol that could command loyalty. Without a title, she held no recognized authority within the court's hierarchy. Without marriage, she lacked the legal protection that secured a lasting place within the household. The court did not need to announce her disappearance. The absence of invitations, the silence of familiar corridors, and the quiet withdrawal of attention communicated the change clearly enough. The environment that once seemed full of opportunity now revealed the limits of influence built on private affection. In the end, the difference between visible power and recognized authority became impossible to ignore. Life as a Tudor mistress once offered moments of influence and attention that seemed close to real power. Yet that influence existed without the crown, titles, or legal recognition that protected those within the formal hierarchy of the court. As the structures of authority continued around her, the memory of fragile influence remained the only trace of the power she once appeared to hold. History often appears orderly when written on paper. Names of kings, queens, and powerful families fill the pages of official records. Dates of coronations, treaties, and royal marriages create a clear timeline that seems to explain how power moved through generations. These documents present the story of a kingdom through figures who held recognized authority. Yet the Tudor court contained many lives that rarely entered those records. Behind every official ceremony stood individuals who influenced daily life without receiving permanent recognition. Servants, companions, advisors, and mistresses all moved through the same halls where decisions about kingdoms were made. Their presence shaped conversations, relationships, and emotions within the court. However, history rarely preserved their stories in detail. Writers who recorded events in Tudor England usually focused on rulers and legitimate heirs. The structure of official history followed the same principles that governed society itself. Legitimacy determined who deserved a place within the narrative of the kingdom. Kings and queens naturally occupied the center of these accounts. Their actions affected diplomacy, warfare, and succession. Their marriages connected royal families across Europe. Their decisions shaped the future of the nation. Because of this, chroniclers carefully recorded their lives, ensuring that their names would remain visible to later generations. The lawful wife also appeared clearly within these records. Her position carried legal and religious recognition, and her children represented the continuation of royal lineage. Births, marriages, and deaths within the royal household received careful documentation because they influenced inheritance and political alliances. The mistress existed outside this official structure. Her relationship with a powerful man might have influenced daily decisions, personal moods, or quiet conversations behind closed doors. She might have witnessed moments that shaped the emotional life of the court, yet these experiences rarely appeared in the documents preserved by historians. When her name appeared at all, it often appeared briefly, a passing reference in a letter A small remark in a diary, or a whisper recorded by a court observer might reveal that she existed. These fragments provided glimpses of her life, but rarely described her story in full. As time passed, those fragments sometimes disappeared as well. Documents could be lost, destroyed, or forgotten. The everyday conversations that once surrounded the mistress faded from memory. The details of her experiences remained scattered across incomplete records that historians later struggled to interpret. In contrast, the names of rulers continue to dominate historical memory. Portraits of kings hung in galleries. Royal genealogies recorded their descendants, and chronicles described their decisions in great detail. These records ensured that their presence remained visible across centuries. The mistress left far fewer traces. She might once have walked through the same halls, heard the same music during royal celebrations, and shared the same air as the figures whose names filled the pages of history. Yet without titles or legal recognition, her connection to those moments rarely appeared in official accounts. Even when historians later attempted to reconstruct these stories, the evidence often remained incomplete. Letters might hint at affection or conflict. Court gossip recorded in private correspondence might suggest that a relationship once existed. These clues allowed historians to imagine fragments of the past, but they rarely revealed the full complexity of the lives involved. As a result, many mistresses slowly disappeared from historical awareness. Their names survived only in scattered notes or uncertain references. The influence they once held within the private world of the court faded as new generations focused on figures whose authority carried formal recognition. This disappearance did not mean their lives lacked significance. Within the daily rhythms of the Tudor court, they had experienced moments of attention, influence, and vulnerability. Their relationships with powerful men had shaped private decisions that sometimes affected larger events. Yet the structure of the historical record did not preserve those experiences with the same care given to rulers. History preferred clear lines of authority. Kings ruled. Queens represented legitimate unions. Heirs inherited the future of the dynasty. These roles formed the central narrative that chroniclers believed deserved permanent documentation. The mistress existed outside that narrative. Her story unfolded in private rooms, quiet conversations, and personal relationships that rarely left formal traces. When the attention of the court moved elsewhere, the memory of her presence gradually faded. Over time, the silence surrounding her life grew deeper. New events replaced the old. New alliances reshaped the court. Generations passed, and the names recorded in official histories continued to guide how people understood the past. Meanwhile, the woman who once lived close to power slowly disappeared from view. The great halls where she once walked remained standing, but the records describing those spaces rarely mentioned her name. The court that once observed her presence moved forward without preserving the details of her story. Official histories carefully recorded the lives of kings, queens, and legitimate heirs who shaped the political future of Tudor England. A mistress, despite once living close to power, rarely appeared beyond scattered notes or brief remarks in private letters. As the years passed and memories faded, the life that once attracted attention within the court often disappeared into quiet historical silence. Power inside the Tudor court did not always appear through crowns, titles, or official positions. Influence could also grow quietly through proximity to those who ruled. A word spoken at the right moment, a private conversation held away from the crowded halls, or a suggestion offered during a quiet evening could shape decisions that later affected an entire household. Mistresses sometimes occupied this unusual space. They did not hold recognized authority, yet their closeness to powerful men created opportunities for subtle influence, because they shared moments of privacy that others rarely witnessed. They sometimes gained insight into the personal concerns of those who governed the court. These insights allowed them to speak in ways that might guide emotions or thoughts. This influence often remained invisible to the outside world. Unlike ministers or advisors, whose roles appeared openly within the political structure, a mistress worked within personal spaces rather than official chambers. Her voice rarely appeared in records or council discussions. Instead, her influence unfolded through private conversations that disappeared once they ended. Such influence could feel powerful while it lasted. A powerful man might listen carefully to the opinions of someone he trusted emotionally. Small suggestions offered during relaxed moments sometimes carried more weight than formal arguments delivered in crowded meetings. Because of this dynamic, a mistress occasionally appeared to possess surprising influence over decisions. Yet this form of power rested on fragile foundations. Official authority in Tudor society relied on visible symbols. Crowns represented royal sovereignty. Titles confirmed noble rank. Legal documents recorded property, inheritance, and alliances. These symbols gave power a structure that could survive changes in personal relationships. A mistress possessed none of these symbols. Her influence existed only through the attention of the man who valued her presence. The moment that attention weakened, the foundations supporting her influence weakened as well. Without legal recognition, she had no position within the hierarchy that governed the court. This difference shaped how others viewed her role. Courtiers understood that her influence depended entirely on personal favor. They might treat her respectfully while that favor remained strong. Yet they also recognized that her position could disappear quickly. Because of this uncertainty, many observers hesitated to treat her authority as permanent. The court itself reinforced this limitation. Ceremonies, titles, and public rituals reminded everyone where legitimate power truly resided. Queens stood beside kings during official events, representing alliances recognized by both law and religion. Ministers spoke during council meetings, presenting arguments supported by political responsibility. A mistress rarely appeared in these spaces. Her presence remained tied to private life rather than public authority. Even if her words shaped the personal thinking of a powerful man, the final decision still emerged through official structures controlled by recognized figures. This separation revealed the limits of unofficial influence. A mistress might guide emotion, encourage reflection, or offer comfort during moments of uncertainty. Yet she could not claim authority openly. She could not command loyalty from others through titles or legal rights. Her influence depended entirely on the continuation of personal affection. As long as that affection endured, her presence might feel significant. Courtiers might speculate about the opinions she shared in private. Advisors might wonder whether certain decisions reflected conversations held away from the council chamber. The possibility of influence created an atmosphere where her presence carried quiet significance. But the absence of formal authority always remained visible. If disagreements emerged within the court, she possessed no official platform from which to defend her perspective. If her reputation suffered, she lacked the legal standing that might protect someone with recognized status. Her voice existed only within personal relationships. Because of this, her influence could fade as quietly as it had appeared. A change in personal affection, a shift in political priorities, or the arrival of someone new could alter the balance of attention within the court. Once that balance changed, the subtle influence she once held often disappeared without explanation. The court continued functioning according to its established hierarchy. Kings ruled. Queens represented legitimate unions. Ministers advised through formal channels, and heirs prepared to inherit authority. These roles carried visible symbols that ensured continuity even as individual relationships evolved. A mistress stood outside that structure. Her influence might have touched moments of decision, yet it left few traces within the official record of power. The court acknowledged her presence only as long as personal favor sustained it. Once that favor faded, the limits of unofficial authority became impossible to ignore. Influence within the Tudor court sometimes emerged through private relationships rather than official titles. A mistress could shape emotions and conversations in ways that briefly affected decisions made by powerful men. yet without the symbols and structures that defined legitimate authority. This influence remained fragile and easily lost. Power inside the Tudor court often appeared to follow clear lines of authority. Kings ruled with crowns upon their heads. Queens stood beside them with titles recognized by both law and religion. Noble families maintained influence through land, inheritance, and carefully arranged marriages. These structures created the visible framework through which power moved from one generation to the next. Yet within the same court existed another kind of influence that did not appear in official ceremonies. Mistresses sometimes stood close to the center of royal life, without belonging to the system that protected it. Their presence emerged through personal relationships rather than through formal recognition. They occupied spaces that existed between public authority and private emotion. For a time, that position could feel remarkably powerful. A mistress might share conversations that few others heard. She might witness the moods, doubts, and reflections of a powerful man during moments when the formal rules of court life briefly faded. In those quiet hours, her words could carry weight. Personal influence is often developed through trust. A ruler surrounded by advisors and political expectations sometimes found comfort in the presence of someone who did not approach him through official responsibility. A mistress could speak with familiarity rather than ceremony. She could listen without the pressure of political ambition. These private exchanges sometimes shape decisions in subtle ways. A quiet remark offered during a peaceful evening might influence how a ruler viewed a situation the following day. Emotional support could strengthen confidence or encourage reflection. Such moments created the impression that the mistress possessed influence far beyond her official position. Yet this influence always existed within strict limits. The court recognized authority only when it appeared through established structures. Titles, marriage, inheritance, and ceremony defined who truly belonged to the system of power. These elements protected individuals from sudden changes in personal relationships. A mistress remained outside those protections. Her influence depended entirely on the continuation of personal affection. The court could observe her closeness to power, yet it did not grant her the symbols that secured a permanent place within the hierarchy. Without those symbols, her position remained uncertain. This uncertainty formed the central contradiction of her life. At certain moment, she might appear capable of influencing events within the household or even within the wider court. Courtiers might whisper about her role in private decisions. Observers might speculate about how much her presence affected the thoughts of a powerful man. But the same environment that allowed such influence also limited it. When conflict, scandal, or political pressure appeared, the court turned to its established structures for stability: lawful marriage, noble lineage, and recognized authority offered clear solutions for preserving order. Personal relationships that existed outside those structures rarely survived such moments of tension. The mistress, therefore, carried influence without protection. If rumors spread or alliances required adjustment, the court possessed little incentive to defend her position. Advisors focused on preserving the reputation of the ruler and the stability of the household. These priorities often outweighed any personal loyalty the ruler might feel. Because of this, the transition from influence to disappearance could happen quietly. A woman who once walked through candlelit halls beside powerful figures might gradually find herself removed from those spaces. Invitations disappeared. Conversations ended more quickly. The attention that once surrounded her faded into silence. The court continued forward. New alliances formed. New relationships attracted curiosity. Ceremonies and gatherings filled the halls with familiar rhythms of noble life. The system that preserved titles and lineage remained intact. Meanwhile, the mistress who once seemed close to power faded into the background. Her influence rarely appeared in official records. The quiet conversations that once shaped her world disappeared from memory. Even the court that had once watched her closely gradually turned its attention elsewhere. Over time, the memory of her presence softened into fragments. Perhaps a letter hinted at her existence. Perhaps a small remark in a diary suggested that she once stood near the centre of attention. These scattered traces remained the only reminders of a life that once unfolded within the same walls that history remembered so clearly. The contrast revealed the deeper truth about unofficial power. Influence without recognition could feel real and immediate while it lasted, yet without the structures that preserved authority across time, such influence rarely left a lasting mark. The court continued to honour crowns, titles, and marriages long after private relationships had disappeared. The mistress lived within the fragile space between these worlds. She experienced moments of attention and closeness that seemed to place her near the centre of authority. At the same time, she lacked the protections that allowed others to secure their place within history. This tension defined the paradox of her existence. She could move within the same halls where kings and queens shaped the destiny of a kingdom. She could witness the quiet emotions behind decisions that later appeared in official records. Yet her own story often vanished once those moments passed. Tonight, as the candlelight of the Tudor court grows quiet and the great halls settle into silence, the memory of these women lingers softly in the shadows of history. Their lives remind us that power sometimes appears without the symbols that guarantee safety. If you have followed this story through its quiet corridors and whispered conversations, I hope it has brought a calm moment of reflection before rest. May your evening grow peaceful, and your thoughts settle gently. And wherever you are listening from tonight, I wish you a restful night and the comfort of a deep, quiet sleep.